Excellent. There we go. Awesome. Boom. Uh-oh. There we go. Okay. Video recorded by the host. Got it. Awesome. Great. Okay. Can you see the screen, like the title slide?
Yes.
Awesome. Great. Here we go. I love this title. I'm really excited about the title. I love the and I always am one of those that struggles to title his workshops. What you don't know about speakers is that the biggest pain in the butt we have is, 2 years before we go speak, we have to give a title to our workshop and have to explain it. And we're like, I don't even know who I'm going to be in 2 years. And then titling things is something that I'm really not good at. I am absolutely going to steal this one, though. Drawing teens out of the shadows. And because I really think it speaks that metaphor, that image of a shadow speaks to where a lot of teens are for a lot of different reasons. And we'll cover some of those reasons in the first half of our time together. And we will also talk about how to address it. Petitfils, and I'm sure this is no secret to a lot of you guys up in old Canada, is a French word which means grandson, and that just is me really having to show you that I once upon a time did have hair, and was a cute little chubby kid at that time with hair. These are me and my people on the opposite side of your country, in the far western Canada, enjoying the dog sledding, which was amazing. We talk about our best vacations ever. Easter 4 years ago, we went to Canmore in Alberta, thanks to the tips of a lot of friends I made up there speaking in Alberta. And they were like, oh, you got to go dog sledding. And I was like, oh, okay. And they're like, yeah, but the ice is thinning. It's the last day. But don't worry. The dogs are going to know where the ice is thin. I'm like, really? Like, I'm putting my big bald butt in the hands of a dog. But it was so cool. We had a blast. So that's my wife. Her name is Wright. That's me over there on the right. Now her name's Mindy. Max is now 17. He's no longer perfect. This is clearly an old picture. Really what I need to do is I needed to change this slide and just put expensive on both of them, because that's more along the lines. So just a little bit about my background that Teresa didn't go over. I was a teacher. I was a seminarian for 6 years, left right before ordained to the transitional diaconate, successfully discerned that I wasn't called to a life of celibacy. It was seminary was the 6 funnest years of my life, but I was studying for the diocesan priesthood, and I was going to go out to a parish. I was leaving 200 of my best friends who we had the best 6 years of our life for me to go and spend the rest of my life alone in the middle of nowhere. And I just couldn't do it. And I'm grateful that I successfully discerned out of it. I taught and was campus minister at a Catholic high school in Lafayette for about 10 years. And I went back and got my master's in counseling during that time and was a school counselor, and then got into private practice and was speaking, doing parish missions. And as I began to specialize in teens, I began doing more speaking about teens and even doing consulting with teens. So that's kind of my background, so to speak. As we get into it, it may feel a little bit like drinking water out of a fire hydrant. I'm going to try not to be rushed, but the good news is I will email Teresa the tonight or first thing tomorrow morning, and she'll get a PDF of the slides, so you can have access to that PDF of the slides, assuming you have Google Drive and can download it, a PDF of the slides, and it's also recorded, so you can rewatch the video. So Father Henry Nouwen, the late Father Henry Nouwen, once said that today's missionaries, the church, he probably said this in the 80s, he wrote that the missionaries of the past and Christianity needed to be able to navigate the geographic terrain. If you ever saw the movie The Mission, which is a great watch with Robert De Niro and I forget the name of the guy. Anyway, I'm going to remember his name, but it's a phenomenal movie. He said, unlike those missionaries, he goes, missionaries of the future are going to be missionaries who know how to navigate the terrain of the heart. And so much of what we'll talk about tonight is navigating the terrain of the heart. And so the Holy Father, if you've been awake in the last couple of years and know a Catholic, you've probably heard this word, accompaniment. The Holy Father, Pope Francis, encourages us to be about the work of accompanying people, and sharing the good news as we accompany them, which is, I love that image of walking side by side with folks. And so in Evangelii Gaudium, he writes, the church will have to initiate everyone into the art of accompaniment, which teaches us to remove our sandals before the sacred ground of the other. And this can be really hard with teenagers. It can be really hard because it's really, we can almost have a sort of interpersonal xenophobia when it comes to teens, because they're so different. And the widening cultural crevasse between adult generations, and as I can see many of us here, I'm 48 years old, and every day I come in and feel like it's the crevasse between my generation and where teens are today is ever widening. And so to take my sandals off before the sacred ground of the other, as different from me as they may be, and as afraid of them as I might be, and as lacking as I may be in understanding of who they are, but to take my sandals off and honor that. He said, the pace of this accompaniment must be steady and reassuring, reflecting our closeness and our compassionate gaze, which also heals, liberates, and encourages growth in the Christian life. How powerful are those bold words? Reflecting our closeness and our compassionate gaze, which also heals, liberates, and encourages growth. There's a wonderful, I will attach this to the downloads, wonderful, in a column by your fellow Canadian, again, and Albertan, I'm sorry, Father Ronald Rohiser, who writes that about our to really see young people. And I'll attach that to the thing as well, that seeing people can heal people. I truly believe that. When I graduated, my story, and I get a TED talk on this, and you can watch it if you want the 18-minute version, but the 2-minute version was born to I was the son of a single mom who worked 4 jobs to provide and give me a Catholic education. I was alone a lot as a kid, latchkey kid, turned to food, graduated from high school at over 535 pounds, morbidly obese. I thought I was poor, fat, and stupid. I got a job working in a construction site after I flunked out of a year of college, and a bunch of rednecks from Alabama who were working here in Louisiana saw more in me than I can see in myself. They raised about $5,000 or $6,000, and they paid for me. They fired me from my job and paid for me to go back to school. I end up in a Catholic student center at the promise of donuts. And I went because of the donuts, because I had left the church in 10th grade. And there was a Catholic priest there who just looked at me, and it had to be the way people talk about having met Mother Teresa. He just looked at me and looked through me, and he just cared about me. And not only him, but some other people who didn't seem to notice that I weighed 535 pounds and I was pushing people away. And they saw through me. And within 2.5 years, I would go on to lose 300 pounds. Now, again, them looking at me didn't melt the pounds off, but they reflected to me who I really was, and they saw who I was underneath all of that. And I'm working in my practice now 20, 30 years later with 2 of those folks, and I'm still, the priest is like my dad, and he's a very dear friend of mine. And I believe it. I want every kid to be able to come through my office so that they can feel what it's like for me to see them. It's powerful. It's powerful. Today, more than ever, we need men and women who, on the basis of their experience of accompanying others, are familiar with the processes which call for prudence, understanding, patience, and docility to the Spirit. Brilliant, Pope Francis. Thank you so much. And it's why I'm a therapist. In the seminary for 6 years, and I got it. I got all of the theology, more theology than anyone needs. I've got extra still. 20 years later, I can give you some extra. And then I did ministry. And what I started realizing from 2000 to 2009, doing ministry with teens in a high school, was that ministers didn't need more theology. We needed more training in the social sciences. We were having kids with real problems who were coming to us, and we needed to learn how to listen because they weren't interested in listening to us. We needed to learn how to listen to them. There was this need in the early 2000s, and still now, where teens needed to tell their story. I mean, only in the last 5 years has the United States Catholic Church really fully understood that and put money into research. Thank you, St. Mary's Press and others, and the U.S. bishops, the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry in our country invested in asking people why they left the church. And an overwhelming majority of those people said it's because I needed to tell my story, right? And no one wanted to hear my story. And I've long operated by the belief that people listen when they feel heard. All things being equal, people listen when they feel heard. And so today we'll talk about some skills of listening, not to make you a therapist, but to incorporate the skills of the social sciences that I do think will be helpful for those of us in ministry and in parenting and in teaching. We need to practice the art of listening, which is more than simply hearing. Listening and communication is an openness of the heart, which makes possible genuine closeness, without which genuine spiritual encounters cannot occur. Truer words have not been spoken. Why is accompaniment an art? Well, there's no one way to do it. If your personality doesn't come through, you're not doing it right. How you accompany people should be different than how I accompany people. I am going to do my absolute best. My goal is to not say any curse words here tonight, but I have a potty mouth. And I believe and can write papers, and I'll write a book on it, the therapeutic value of it in cursing. But when I curse in a session, it doesn't, and say, I'm not doing it to impress a kid. I do it because that's who I am. I'll mention another thing about cursing. And look, I'm not encouraging it. Like, my wife is constantly telling my boys, do not repeat after your father. I cannot help the fact that he is overgrown trailer trash and he has not cleaned his act up. But I'm reading these sites by Sherry Waddell, the intentional discipleship, evangelization thing, and the number of people who won't go and watch the movie Father Stu by Mark Wahlberg because of the cursing. And I get it. And she's more gentle than me. She goes, it's okay for people to have an apprehension about it. And I get it. And if you have an apprehension about it, I understand it. But that is your ceiling for evangelization. You've met it right there. Now that's as far as you're willing to go. Because I sit with kids every day and I do evangelization, and I have about one a month who come in here and they tell me to fuck off for about an hour straight and tell me what I can go do with myself and all of that. And if I got butthurt by that, I would have probably in the course of my career not been able to have reached and maybe even saved the lives of about 30 young people. There's no one way to do it. But to understand that teens are in the shadows. And one of the reasons teens are in the shadows is that if we're honest, and please be honest, because at least then you have an opportunity to be able to relate with that other person. If you don't want to go and see what's in the shadows, if you don't want to go and encounter the pierced, the foul-mouthed, tattooed up, impolite, God hating, which is a mask very often, God hating, wounded kid who's in the shadows, acknowledge that and own that piece of it. And that's where I feel like we would do so much better as a church if we just sometimes came out and said that many people in the church really just don't want people who are that different sitting next to us in the pews. And if we said that, we would regain a lot of respect, but we pretend it's not true. And I know it's not true for those of you guys in the Diocese of Hamilton. I am talking about those people in Alberta, right? It's not true for you guys. But it's just so important. And if you can recognize that, like, I know there are types of clients, and we talk about it in session, we're not in session, but in our group, to say, hey, this type of client really pushes my buttons. And we can do one of two things. Either I'm not going to see that type of client, or I've got to work through where that resistance is in me. So your personality will come through. Every team's is different, and obviously it's need driven, off the soapbox. So accompanying youth, we support and we challenge, but those are in the correct order. We support, then we challenge, right? And a bishop here, Bishop Sam Jacobs in Louisiana, has a saying that I love, and it's, you can't get 2 tons of truth over a 1-ton love bridge. You can't get 2 tons of truth over a 1-ton love bridge, right? Nobody that you do, and we do it all the time. Like, I have done convocations for priests, and we're like, you're preaching, you think your preaching is great, but it's not. Folks aren't, half the people aren't listening. You're preaching to the choir's listening to you, but the other, there's about 60% of people in there who really don't want to be there, who are there out of obligation. And if you don't really know what's going on in their lives, and are talking about and making the gospel relevant to their lives, you are not evangelizing. You're not. You're preaching to the choir. And so we support and we challenge, but I can't challenge people who I don't really know. So you can read the rest. To accompany, we want to understand, then we reach, and then we influence. And those are in the correct order, right? So to get young people out of the shadows, we've got to understand them. Secondly, we've got to be able to reach them. Like, we got to be able to make a connection. And the connection is only, now we're just getting started. Then and only then can I begin to influence them and be able to challenge them and offer them helpful advice, or help them adjust their lives, or just help them to stay in relationship with meaningful adults, which we know is so good for kids. We want to be present with and among them. We want to ask provocative questions, and I'm going to give you some of those tonight. We absolutely want to pray with and for them. And accompanying youth also means that we want to accompany their parents. And so many of us can find we do amazing youth ministry by walking with parents as well. And I know we got a really mixed audience here tonight. By the way, I wanted to say that Teresa and I want your questions. Like, if you've got questions, like clarifying questions or real big questions, like, that doesn't even have to be real big questions. Get them to her as we go. You can get them to, I'm not reading the chat. I'm guessing, Teresa, you are?
Yes, I'll keep my eye on the chat.
You're
so
keeping your eye on the chat. You don't need to wait till the end. And she's going to let me know if it's relevant. You know, you're not interrupting me. I'm not here to give you a slide deck. I'm really here to address your concerns and answer any questions that I can. So accompany is not therapy. It's sure as hell not fixing. How well, just for a second, think about the last person in your life you tried to fix. And just give that about 3 seconds and remember how well that went, and how you probably wanted to bludgeon yourself in the head with a hammer when you were done, because it went about that well, right? And most of us, if we're really honest, we can't even fix ourselves. Like, why am I practicing on someone else? I'm a hot mess. And I get joked about that with people all the time. They're like, you are a hot mess. How the hell are you going to fix other people? I was like, well, that's a misconception about therapy. I don't fix them. One, God does that. I cooperate with God's grace, but my job is to pull the tools out of the client so that they can find solutions. I cannot, I was telling young therapists this the other day, and I'm a young therapist, but like I've been doing this I've been working with teens for almost 30 years now, counseling them for almost 15. I was like, they were like, I just don't know what advice to give them. I was like, pack your advice. Unless someone begs you for advice, then they don't want your advice. They can go to Google and get advice. Social work. It's not social work, and it's not simple, and it's not easy, but the benefits of accompaniment is that we can give language to their experience. We can help them feel less alone. And we'll talk about why that's so important later. We model for them relational skills. That's one of the huge things that I try to do. And I don't know if we have any therapists in here, but it seems to be the one thing that therapists in training missed from one of the giants in psychotherapy, Dr. Irving Yalom, a psychiatrist who would always encourage therapists to talk about with the client, to talk about what's going on in therapy. It's like, we don't do that. People don't do that in their lives. And we have an opportunity to do that, to sit with young people who we're in relationship with and say, hey, how's that? What do you think about this? What do you think about our relationship? What do you think about me? Am I being too hard on you? Do you feel like I get you? And then obviously to share faith with people. But I think most people think that the opportunity for the kids who are in the shadows, I think most people really, really far underestimate how far at the end of the line, like how far late in the process, faith sharing really is. Like, it comes after doing a mountain of non-sexy, non-spiritual, non-religious-y relational work. Because if that comes too early, young people like me, and this was my experience. Like, if that priest had said, go to pizza and then, let's go to mass, I'd have been like, hey, back off, dude. I haven't been to church in 2 years, and don't bribe me with pizza, and don't pretend to be my friend so that you can just yank me into the church. But I know some of us are like, but wait a second, it's good. What we're trying to do is good. Yes, I get it. And I know your intention is good, but the process is overtly manipulative and it doesn't work. And so often, our attempts to reach people in the shadows, we come across like the religious Catholic version of a shady used car salesman. It's like, I'll say anything to get you in the church. And it's like, ugh, it makes me want to puke, and it makes them want to puke. And it reinforces the cultural notion that we don't really care about people who are in the shadows, but we just care about our agenda. And I know the response to that is, but wait, I've got the world's best agenda. Yes, but it's still an agenda. How about the agenda be to really love that person and wait until that person is ready to be able to share faith with them? And we'll talk about that. Okay. So box over, moving on. So let's just talk a little bit about these teenagers in the shadows and how their brains work. Let me make sure my wife's texting me. I hope your talk goes well. Oh, thank you, love. Okay. That made y'all want to gag. Sorry. All right. So adolescent psycho-spiritual development. That is a made up term by me. There's psychological development, but I really do think that it's psycho-spiritual. Let's talk about that. This is wonderful. For my brain, this little arrow going from bottom to up, like, releases dopamine. It's beautiful. This makes my chest tighten. But this is the reality. This is how we grow. We go through these little loops, right? And you throw a little bit of mental health issues, you throw life, you throw reality into this, and it comes off the page and it's all over the damn place. And somehow God, like Mother Teresa said, with this little broken pencil, is making the line go like that, go straight. But this is how young people grow. And it's incredibly frustrating when we hit the loop. Oh, I thought I had that. This is the loop. And this is the Paschal mystery, by the way. It's so for mastery, I don't know if there are any classroom teachers in there, or even any catechism teachers, religious education teachers, but you do not start off at mastery. And I don't know that catechism teachers get it because they're not in the classroom, but classroom teachers get it. You start off at disintegration and death. That's where a classroom, you go in the classroom and I've done it. You think you know the subject, and you do, but you might not have the first clue how to teach it, and it is painful. And 3 years later, you wake up with an alcohol abuse problem because teaching threw you into drinking, and realized, oh crap, it's finally getting easier around year 3. And then about year 5, you start feeling, okay, I don't need a drink to go to work. And you're like, who is this alcoholic giving us this presentation tonight? Does the bishop know about his issues? That's not my drug of choice. Trust me. It's Popeye's fried chicken. But when you're in love and you fall in love, I remember when I fell in love with my wife, that's mastery. It's that honeymoon phase, which is beautiful. It's amazing. And then kids come along. Or you get your first fight and it's disintegration, and it's disillusioning as hell. It's disillusioning as hell. And that is in that first 3 to 5 years when the doo-doo hits the fan. And as your fellow Canadian, a guy who I love very much, Father Ron Rollheiser said, the first task in any love relationship is to console the other for the fact that our love has limits and we cannot not disappoint them. And this happens in our relationship with God, and God uses other people to console us for the fact that while his love doesn't have limits, our ability to receive God's love has limits, and we will be disillusioned and disappointed with God because we cannot see the big picture because of our human limitations. But then we reintegrate. We come along and we begin figuring out this is adolescence. Teenagers go through this almost yearly, but absolutely within high school, they're going to go through it twice and at least once during middle school. And it's tough. And this is how we're called to be with them. And often people come to church and come to God when they're disintegrating, when they can't make sense of it any other way. Someone says, hey, maybe you should consider praying or whatever. And yes, it's awesome. So cognitive development. This is why teenagers are a pain in the ass, because they develop this capacity for abstraction and they suddenly become very contrarian. You become an idiot overnight because their brain has grown a millimeter and they know everything like all at once. And you just want to punch them in the trachea. But it's also what makes them so funny and so enjoyable, because they will read their mother, your wife, for dirt and start picking up and pointing out all her flaws that you've seen for all these years. And she doesn't believe you, but now the kid says it, and you conceal your joy in that moment because she will punch you in the trachea. And so, yes, it's beautiful. They have a limited ability to hold paradox. And by that, they have a limited ability to hold contradictions. They are become expert at pointing out your hypocrisy while being completely blinded to their own. And this is the definition of a teenager. Their massive growth in analytical. Oh, and I love it. And I love analysis. I love it. My wife says, good teachers have the ability to take complicated stuff and make it simple. And you have the ability to make the simplest stuff in the world complicated as hell. And she's right. And it's because I love and me and my teenager now sit down and we analyze everything. And it is amazing. I can't wait to be able to share a beer with him one day, and then we can really get into it. They do need help with synthesis. Social development. There are these competing needs. And the biggest one during adolescence is I need to stand out and I need to fit in. I need autonomy and I need you to protect me and to set boundaries. And so they're working against each other. And it's really, really hard. At no other time in their life are they going to experience the psychosocial spiritual need to be terminally unique and fit in seamlessly with everyone else on the planet. And that is enough to make someone crazy, hence the teenager. They shift from being identified with their parents' values and wants and needs to their peers. We all know that. They become very narcissistic and other focused. And they think the whole world's looking at them when no one really gives two flips about what's going on, because we're all thinking about ourselves. The prefrontal cortex is in limited growth, and that's the ability to kind of tell them that all of the obsessive, paranoid, and narcissistic thoughts that they're having are ridiculous, and they're completely driven out of the amygdala because it is fully formed and it's ready to grow. But the executive center of the brain, the policeman of the brain, is just not online. And so the amygdala can really run rampant, hence the very quick eye rolls. Right. You say something, you say something to an adult, and most adults have them. And some of us like wear it on our sleeves because we've given ourselves permission to do it. But there was probably a time in most adults' lives when someone said something and we really just wanted to like puke on them. And we went, well, that's interesting. Right. That's your prefrontal cortex going, supplant that. You don't want to get arrested. You can't afford to lose this client. Like you can't afford to lose your job. You don't want to get divorced. Shut the cake hole under your nose and like put on an interesting expression. Teens can't do that. They light switch fast. Amygdala, their neurotransmitters are, because the brain is growing, it's recovering. During middle school, which is why all middle school parents should have a handicap license plate on their car, because middle school students are literally operating with a very small portion of a brain. Because around about 10 to 12, the brain begins to flush all of the neural connections and synapses that it has formed, but it hadn't used in a while. And it just goes, hey, flush all that to deep storage. And so it gets rid of all of this part of the brain, and it's trying to make room for more stuff. And so the brain is undergoing, qualitative and quantitative material matter changes. And that is just, it's haywire in there. And then they become, as I mentioned earlier, we've got unstable adolescents becoming more and more reliant upon other unstable adolescents. And that's comforting. That's comforting. Like they're making their decisions based on people without a brain and a fully, developed prefrontal cortex. And that's part of what we do as adults for our kids, is that we loan them in a very sophisticated way. And I'm going to talk about how to do it, because you can do it and be very condescending. Oh, hold on a second, son. Let me loan you my prefrontal cortex so you're not a stupid idiot right now. That isn't going to land well. This one's huge. Who am I and why? Who loves me and why? What is lovable? And that's a key role that we play, to teach young people what is worthy of their love, right? And I sit with them all the time. And when the relationship is solid, to go, hey, marijuana cannot hold your heart as good as it is. Right? As good as it is. And if you don't have a prescription for it, like drugs, alcohol, another person your age, the young man and this young woman at this stage in your life cannot hold your heart. And I get it. It is impossible for teens to date anymore. Teens do not date. They temporarily marry each other during the teen years. And that is why we see such huge, but the culture doesn't allow it to happen. It's, and so many of them now get to college and they're like, I just realized how toxic all my friendships were and like relationships were. And I was like, be gentle. I don't know anyone who doesn't. I don't know many teens who aren't, if they're in a romantic relationship where it's not toxic, because they're constantly communicating, and it's impossible to not become too close to that person. And how do I love things? How do I set boundaries? And what can I offer the world? A lot of kids really do want to know that. Like, what is it that I have to offer? So that young brain, right? Neurons that fire together, wire together. We have a lot of kids and their parents addicted to technology because that's where the neurons are firing, that are becoming dopamine dependent upon technology. And that's us, folks. I mean, and some of you maybe not, and good for you, but try to not pick up your phone when you want to pick up your phone. And it's hard. And it's because your brain's craving dopamine. We already covered that. Pruning and myelination, like basically neural pruning is getting rid of all the stuff. The corpus callosum is the part that bridges the left and right hemispheres of the brain. So that's developing. And it gives them the ability to use either side of their brain. A lot more than just hormones are going on. And obviously the rewiring with electronics. They're more prone to addiction because never in your life will your brain produce more dopamine without the use of substances as when you were a teenager. And so it becomes, that if you do, let's say you have a drink as an adult, assuming you had the taste for alcohol, if you tried it as a teenager, nothing's as good. I mean, nothing's as good. And because it produces dopamine, risk also produces dopamine, and risk without a prefrontal cortex causes a teen to have an explosive orgasmic experience about doing really stupid things like riding a motorcycle off a cliff. And it's like, why are you doing that? And they're like, why aren't you doing it with me? Like, and look, dopamine comes in the end. And what we know about dopamine now is that it is an anticipatory neurotransmitter. Like we get the most dopamine when we're anticipating an experience. Like looking forward to vacation is without question produces more dopamine than any day you have on vacation. Look, the anticipatory aspect of it. And they have weaker stop signals because they don't have a prefrontal cortex. More dopamine. So what's going on in the shadows? Like, what are some things? What do the shadows kind of look like? We got a lot of disillusioned kids. We got a lot of disillusioned adults. I'd be lying to you if I didn't tell you I work with a lot of, folks who have been hurt by the church, been hurt by adults. I'm still brokenhearted that Lance Armstrong was doping. I mean, it's just, we don't have a whole lot of heroes, or we don't benefit. Maybe these heroes are no different from the farmer heroes. We just didn't know about it. And so we were able to live a little bit of a more romanticized. We got kids who are less resilient. I'm going to pause here. I want to see which ones I want to go through. Yeah. So depression, suicide, eating disorders. These are more than 50% of teens will tell you that they're in unhealthy relationships. We got a lot of bullying. We got a lot of kids who are in the LGBTQ spectrum. And depending upon where you live, right, depending upon where those kids are, depends on their mental health. We can see it. Like we can absolutely see it. The mental health rates for these kids in South Louisiana, where it's very, very conservative, very, very Catholic, politically not accepted. I mean, we still have, unabashed racism run amok in my part of the world down here. I mean, these kids suffer here. And there are other parts of the country that they do fine. Like they're fine. But it depends. A lot of sleep deprivation. Coherent versus adherent. When the world revolved around the church and religion, when religion had a central place in the civic sphere, and that was probably right up until the 1960s, right? Especially in the 1980s, especially for Catholicism, when the sex abuse crisis kind of started coming to the fore, the cosmic egg started shifting. Our disenchantment with authority, with institutions as we get into the 90s, the world stopped cohering as much. We still have blue light laws. You can't buy cars on Sunday in Louisiana, which is interesting because you can get drive-through alcohol in Louisiana, but you can't buy a car on Sunday. For that reason, that's where we're going to draw the line. Okay. But we don't cohere. It's adherent. And every once in a while, one of those little monkey bars is God, is the church. But for a lot of times, they'll just hang on the girlfriend or the boyfriend or another person or an identity. And it's not adhering around a central hub. And that is problematic. because when one of those things falls, then we fall. Whereas a spoke could break in that bicycle and the whole thing doesn't crumble when it coheres. And so we've lost a lot of that, a lot of single parenting, um, a lot of kids. This is important. A lot of kids pursuing success because that's what the media is telling them. We've got more unhappy people in the world who are workaholics trying to make so much money so that they can have things to impress people they don't even freaking like, and who would be much happier making half the money that they make, having a job that they worked 30 to 40 hours a week, and they actually got to enjoy their friends and enjoy their life. And we've got young people pursuing that definition of success over parenting. We're dealing with that lack of failure, more options for avoidance, and they can avoid us. And that is definitely really important. Of special concern is trauma. The special concern is trauma. We've got a lot of trauma. Everyone, like the last 2 years is going to be considered an adverse childhood experience. So for most kids, whether even if they just saw the images on TV of COVID, especially those of us in the United States, and I'm not sure how much it translated, but the real racial unrest that we had with a few incidents that just we all had time to absorb because we had nothing to do but watch TV. And we still can't get over the George Floyd and other things. We saw these things on TV and it traumatized us. It's a whole, I could do a whole work. I've done several on mind mapping just on the images and how that affects us. But young people go through traumas. They have other experiences. And a lot of this is affecting those kids who are in the shadows. They're traumatized. And this is what's so important about getting them out of the shadows is because, so trauma is a neurophysiological response to a deeply disturbing or distressing experience. Here's a better definition. Going through that disturbing or distressing experience in the absence of an empathic observer. This is huge. We've tested this. We've put people who've gone through the same experience through two types of therapy: cognitive behavioral therapy, which is focused on reordering the cognitions, the beliefs around the event, and the behaviors associated with those thoughts, and others through emotionally focused therapy, where the therapist stays really present and is constantly engaging the client and going, what was that like for you? And they spend extra effort communicating back to the client, reflecting to them, saying, so, wow, this had to be, I can't even imagine what that must have been like for you to have not even be able to go to your grandfather's funeral because of COVID. Like that had to be, yeah, it was really rough. And to spend time with folks and like do that with them. And the one that gets emotionally focused therapy comes out far better with a small t now versus the one with cognitive behavioral therapy where the trauma seems largely untouched. Okay. Why is this important? Because you don't have to be a therapist to be an empathic observer. You don't even have to have a long conversation with someone to be an empathic observer. You can just walk along and go, hey, Raphael, how you doing? I'm good, man. And if you're being observant, which we'll talk a lot about in a second, you'll notice that something about Raphael is what probably made you ask him how he's doing, but maybe not. But there's something about his verbal affect incongruency, meaning his words don't line up with what you're seeing. That makes you not believe that. But instead of introducing Raphael to a therapy session in the middle of the hallway at school or on the front porch of your house, you go, all right, man. Okay. All right. I'll check in again later. And you're letting him know, I know you're bullcrapping me, right? I get it. And I know why, but I'm getting that you're having a bad day. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as going, like, people really, in my experience, having worked with people who have undergone some of the most unimaginable pain, and myself, the worst part of it is the belief that I am alone in the pain. And when we let other folks know that I am with you in it, I can't fix it. I don't know how to fix it, but I'm willing to be with you in it. That changes the brain. It changes the heart, and it builds a relationship, which is so important. I'll let you have those slides on trauma. I really want to move on. Another one of the reasons we've got a lot of kids in the shadows right now is because we've got a lot of kids, especially now on the other side of COVID, where we pulled kids out of human interaction for almost a year, in some places more. We've got kids who were already struggling due to over reliance on technology and not accurately decoding nonverbal communication and practicing social skills. We've got kids who are even more in deficit about that. And so this is a slide created before COVID that's even more true now. I'm fearing the interpersonal interaction for a bunch of different reasons, because I can't pick up and accurately ascertain what's my status in the group, or I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to facilitate the social interaction. And so we got kids who are having social nervousness. They're habituated and probably have been enabled a lot of times by their parents to isolation as a coping mechanism. Their fear of failure about messing up or about drawing too much attention to them is crazy. Now, these kids may or may not have clinical levels of anxiety. A lot of these kids have social nervousness, and you'll notice them. So what do we know? What's the difference between social nervousness and social anxiety disorder? Social anxiety is often really young. We notice that with kids right off the bat, very young onset. They have physiological symptoms when they're young, significant impairment of functioning, and they usually need specialized assistance. Social nervousness comes on during adolescence or puberty. It's mild, if any physiological symptoms, mild to moderate impediments in functioning. It's inconsistent. Kids will be okay in certain instances and not in others, which is always a clue to help us figure out what's going on. And it eases when avoidance is not an option. So throwing a kid with social anxiety disorder into a crowd is going to cripple them. Pushing a kid who has social nervousness into the group will make it better in time sometimes. So that's important. That's important. I know that names it for a lot of folks. So what do they need from us? What do kids need from us? One is to understand, especially those of us who are people of faith, understand this is a longfin eel. And what's interesting about the longfin eel is that in New Zealand, they don't need hooks to catch them. Longfin eels have teeth. Their teeth point toward the back of their mouth. And so in order to catch a longfin eel, they do like we do for crabbing down here in Louisiana. We just throw turkey necks or chicken necks in the water, and the crab will like grab onto it. You can just pull them up. But same thing's true with the longfin eel. You don't need a hook. You just put the bait. When they bite it, all you do is gently pull it in. And this is a good model of faith for us. We don't need to set the hook. I used to go to conferences where they were like setting the evangelical hook, and I'd be like, oh God. And I get it. Jesus was a fisherman. You know, even though they use nets, they probably aren't using like Abu Garcia rod and reels. You know, I get it. But we don't need to set the hook, right? You know, if what we're selling and what we're offering to them is as good as we say it is, and they don't want it, then we need to figure out why. Either what we're selling is not as good as we say it is, or we're the messenger is the problem, or there's some other block, but we need to find out why. Yogi Berra said, you can observe a lot by watching. Mother Teresa said, how can we claim to see Christ in bread if you can't see him in other people? Anais Nin said, you know, we don't see others as they are. We see them as we are. That's profound. It's really profound. So the skills of attending, you know, one of the things that I'm working with teens, you know, everyone knows what deja vu is, right? Deja vu is having a novel experience, but our brain construes it as a familiar experience. We've never had the experience before, but our brain is telling us we've been here before and I've experienced this before. And that's deja vu. Okay. Vujade is a real thing, believe it or not. And vujade is, I am having a familiar experience that I have had many times before. I'm seeing the same kid, but I'm seeing them differently. I'm seeing them differently because of my prayer, because of God's grace, because of what I've, because of workshops I've attended, because of what I've learned. I no longer see this person this way. I see this person this way. And that's a grace that I would encourage us all to pray for. My favorite definition of prayer comes from a Carmelite priest, Father John McNamara, who calls prayer, contemplative prayer, a long, loving look at the real. A long, loving look at the real. Carl Jung said, you cannot change that which you do not accept. Right? Until I accept it, until I accept myself, until I accept others. And for most of us, real self-acceptance doesn't happen in the first half of life. It just doesn't. Like I think I really have only begun to scratch the surface in the last 4 or 5 or 6 years. And I'm still way on the other side of it. But real self-acceptance, to see myself as a mess of contradictions, right? You know what's interesting? Whenever I encounter someone who's judgmental, what I can say to and I used to be judgmental toward that person. And now I go, there's someone who is just not self-aware. They just don't know themselves very well. Because to know yourself is to know that you're a mixed bag. I remember I went on a retreat in the desert, southern desert of Texas, and I spent 8 days in a hermitage. God, that hurt. Jesus Christ, did that hurt. Day 2, I'm in a pool of my own tears, of loneliness, lack of stimulation, dopamine withdrawal from my phone. And this was about 10 years ago. And I remember for the next 5 days, God showing me how everything that I thought I had done for God was really done for my own ego. That I did it and I thought I was this noble, heroic person, but I really did it because most of it, because it made me feel good about myself. And I felt like I was a pretty damn good person. And then God just took that. It was like a sucker punch. People go, oh, I really want to have self-knowledge. Real self-knowledge will make you puke. Trust me. After 25, to know who you really are is going to make you want to puke. And if not, then you're not real. You're just scratching the surface, because we are all messed up. How dare we judge other people? How dare we stand up and for 1 second start criticizing and being judgmental toward LGBTQ people when we just pounded down 7 Whoppers at the Burger King? Like, how can we not see that we equivocate our sin is better than what we think their sin is? Like, for the love of God. And to think that this is lost on people, we are in the biggest state of institutional denial there is. And so when I look at the real in others, that's going to hold up the real in me. And when I know the real person in me, I am not threatening to other people. I'm just not threatening to other people. And I know people who do their inner work and who spend time in front of the monstrance, because spending time in front of the Eucharist helps them to do that. It doesn't matter whether you do it at the pond, in the deer stand, and the Eucharist, right? Real authentic encounter in prayer will help us to see the real outside of us and the real inside of us. And when we can do that and be there with other people and love it, then we are not threatening. So what do we do? How do we reach out to young people? Well, the first one is, I think, be observant. Who's here with you now? Pay attention, real close attention. Who's here with you? Who's the teen there? What's the same about them? What's changed? What about them do you notice? Mood, style, mannerisms. What about them are you trying to ignore that you wish weren't there? What's going on in their lives, family and friends? Paying attention. Take some time to pay attention to the teens in your life. Obviously, don't be creepy, but pay attention. To help in that, the Center for Parent Youth Understanding, that's not a Catholic group, but they're phenomenal. Like, when I want to know what's going on in the culture, if I'm not picking up on it, that's where I go. I learn a lot about teen culture. They have a very great podcast. It's very evangelical in its tone, right? But really good stuff. They tackle the hardest issues way before any Catholic person in the country gets to some of the hardest issues. And I just love that. So I highly recommend that as a resource. So ask questions. What's it like to be you? What's it like to be a teen today? If that opportunity comes up and doesn't seem forced. What's one thing adults like if you have youth groups or if you got kids, especially when you can survey them? I don't understand why people don't. I would be a complete sociologist, youth minister. I'd be surveying those little, what's all the time. What's one thing adults need to know, but we don't? What's one thing most adults in your life think they understand about you guys, but they don't? What's one thing teens really need from adults, but won't ask for, or do ask for, but they feel like adults don't get it? These are diamonds. When I hear kids answer these questions with me in therapy, because they don't see me as an adult, even though I don't show up as a kid, I show up as an adult, but I'm a safe adult. So they can tell us. And like, they know I want to hear. When they give me answers to this, boy, those are gems. Make sure you practice making safe observations. Make sure you mean it and it's authentic. Consider asking permission. Hey, would it be okay if I make an observation or pay you a small compliment? This gives the teen a greater sense of power in the relationship. Don't make observations about physical appearance, especially about weight. Hey, I've noticed you've gained weight. I've noticed you've lost weight. All the research on that shows that is absolutely fueling eating disordered and disordered thinking about food. Unless that person has told you, hey, I'm really working on a plan to lose weight or to gain weight, right? Unless and then you ask them, hey, can I make an observation? Would it be okay if I notice and just want to pay you a compliment? And you get explicit permission. And look, I messed this up for years, but I now know, and we know better about it. But say, hey, I had a kid who came in today and I was like, man, but only because it's true. I was like, I love your glasses. I do. And every time I go to get new glasses, I try on pairs like that, but they don't fit my bald head well. And they look phenomenal on you. And man, like he knew it was genuine and he just lit up. He's like, finally, someone appreciates my style. And I was like, you do. Like, I can't name it. No, I can watch Making the Cut and, Project Runway all I want, but, I'm not going to get style, but I recognize one when I see it. Put observations more tentatively. Hey, I could be wrong, but it just seems like you're off. Something's wrong with you lately. Is it just me or there's something going on? Did I upset you? Please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems. This way, teens feel safe to correct you if you're off. That's a real powerful communication tip. How do we communicate with them? We take the initiative. We get over our fears. And if you've ever experienced rejection in your life, and I have, like at the level of giving a TED talk on it, I can tell you that taking the initiative with teens is really, really tough. I didn't speak to teens for 10 years. I just spoke with adults because the thought of getting up in front of a group of kids who would be mean to me, like, scared me. But we take the initiative. Find a good time to talk. I'll tell you, most of the time teens prefer to talk in the evenings, rarely in the early morning, but sometimes they do. The art of the micro conversation. This is an absolutely essential, critical skill for parents and for other kids, often in the lives of teens, but especially for parents. They have to master the micro conversation. And I watch it happen in our life. And my boys will run me under the bus, but they absolutely love the fact that, like, hey, we're going to talk about pornography for 10 minutes. 2 minutes? When would that be a good time? Hey, we're going to talk about sex for 3 minutes. When would be a good time? Hey, we're going to talk about vaping for 3 minutes, because these things are important and they're not the talk. They're the talks. They need more than one chat. That brain that I just described to you, that's barely functioning and like being picked up on a CAT scan, needs more than one input into it. Like, we don't have the talk, when he's in 8th grade and expect that to carry him through. No, this is not the adolescent animal. But you can want and see, I think certain people like me can observe the nonverbal behavior, and I can tell. Like, I wish I could tell the priest when to shut the K-Cole under his nose. I can see everyone's eyes glazed over after the 3rd homily, much less the 5th freaking homily. Like, shut up. I know you're tired. You got to say this crap 10 more times this weekend. Like, pay attention. Like, and this is hard for me, but I've done the content so many times. And I know it's a lot of you are like, shut up, we're ready to go. Well, you can log off and we won't know. That's fine, right? But my wife gets into these lectures and just like, oh, I'm so disappointed. Like, I just thought we raised you better. I'm like, take the damn phone. Hey, I love you. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Give me your phone. Thank you. And end of story. Like, we don't need to have the emotional arbitrage. Also, hey, I want to talk to you about college. And I can see the look in my son's eyes. He's like, I got to go to bed in 4 hours. We don't have time for this conversation, because he knows his mother is about to hijack him for a minimum of 30 minutes to an hour. And he's like, okay, I can't do it. And I'm like, what if we just did it in 10? Now, the onus on us is to be ready to have those. But I'm telling you, micro conversations work, especially difficult, awkward conversations. Set the timer on your phone, and we will talk about this until the timer goes off. You can have another conversation after the timer goes off. Be yourself. Use your own language. If you don't know how to say it, tell them. Say, hey, I really don't know how to tell you this, but I think you're being a little jerk. That's just obviously an exaggerated example. Like, I don't know how to tell you this, but I feel like you don't like me, or I just feel like you're pulling away. And I've had these conversations. And the last thing they want is to see their dad cry, because I'm a crier, and I will. And it's like, I just feel like, what's going on? I'm like, oh, no, shit. Oh, shit, dad. There it goes. I did it. Sorry. No, I'm good. What do you need? You need to go to lunch? You need me to hold your hand? What do you need? For the love of God, dad, do not cry. But just tell them, say, I don't know how to say it. Like, and if you don't understand what the hell they're saying, tell them that. Don't pretend. And I do it all the time, and I correct myself. Oh yeah. And they're like, hey, do you know what that word means? No, I have no clue. I have no clue. And I'm like, why did you do it? I was like, and I teach people not to do it because it's easier. And I get it through context a little bit sometimes. So difficult conversations, like if we have to have difficult conversations with kids, say it. Hey, this is going to be a really awkward conversation. Can I have permission for you and I to have an awkward conversation? And then don't beat around the bush. Get to the point. We need to talk about vaping. I'm very concerned. I don't know what happens with you and your friends. We're going to be drug testing you for nicotine and for, THC and everything else every other week. I recommend that to any parent, like who's really concerned about their kids being, they knew that since they were 7. That's the price you pay for having your father and mom be teachers and therapists. Like, yeah, we're drug testing you. It's not an option. You can just tell your friends. Like, there's no way around it. Like, you're going to become a pro at peeing in a cup by the time you're in 8th grade. Like, it's just not an option. That way you can tell them. You don't even have to think. It's not an option. I will kill you if you fail that test. Like, literally, I will break your windpipe. No, I'm kidding. I didn't say that. Thought about it, but Mindy stopped me. Be their student. Humility. What are they into? What interests do you share? Let kids teach you about things. That's awesome. Be vulnerable. Vulnerability is a learnable skill. Perfection is unattractive. You don't want to always be falling on the sword. But when we try to you know how suffocating that friend of yours who's perfect is? You know how suffocating, I got those people in my life, and they're at a very, very far distance. No one wants to be around them because they're suffocating. I mean, because what we really want to do is beat the hell out of them, because we know they're not perfect. They just don't realize it. But that's how they feel like they're going to be loved. Admit your shortcomings. Don't surrender your role as an adult. Always want respect. Avoid being judgmental. I want to get to listening real quick. And then I know we have some questions that I want to get to. So listening to fix versus listening to understand. A lot of times we're listening to fix because we really want to know, we want to fix the problem. And so we're listening with fixing in mind, and we want to intervene instead of listening to understand. And you just got to slow down, unless it's urgent. And if it's urgent, you're probably getting some help. Unless it's urgent, which most of the time it's not, slow it down. Take whatever you've got on your agenda and slow down. Listening is the communication skill. What makes it hard for you to listen? When is it hardest for you to listen? Those are good questions to ask yourself. We want to attend to the person. We want to reflect what we hear them saying, and we want to validate their experience. If you do those three things in any conversation with anyone in your life, get ready, because they are going to want to talk to you, because we don't listen to one another anymore. This isn't even being a therapist. So here's some other ways that we can listen. Surveys, news, research, via others. Hey, what's going on? And to be intentional about that. If we want to get teens out of the shadows, then we got to know a little bit about what's going on with those kids who are in the shadows. And I'm so glad we're doing this tonight, because you're learning a lot about teenagers who are there. Direct listening, one-on-one setting. You can do it in a classroom. You can do it in a small group, large group presentation. And believe it or not, the best times to listen are when kids ask us those really, really hard questions. Why does the church hate gay people? And I can't tell you how many people throw the catechism at that kid when they ask that question, and they feel compelled to be a defender of the truth. And I can't tell you how that should never be the first thing. Jesus was asked 183 questions in the Gospels. You know how many he answered directly? 2, which must have made him a real pain in the ass to have as a friend, because can you imagine just asking him, hey, Jesus, what would you like for supper? Well, what would you like for supper? For the love of God, man, chicken or fish? Make a decision, or you make it yourself. There we go, right? But like a kid, I would never answer that question, or all the baited questions. Right. We read the Gospels, but we don't realize what a brilliant psychologist he was. Like, well, who do you say that I am? I don't know. Yeah. Why does the church hate gay people? I don't know. Why? But instead we go, oh, no, the church doesn't hate gay people, blah, 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 blah. And we go on a treatise. And the kid has got 15 experiences in his pocket who he's ready to slam dunk your ass on, that for him or her absolutely means the church hates it. And you can go, well, he's misinterpreting it. Okay, so let's pause for a second. This is Mother Teresa, not Roy Petitfils. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be effective? And Mother Teresa would say, it is not enough to be right. God does not call us to be right. He calls us to be effective. Being right is a need of the ego, and that is the sin of pride. Well, we got to be right, and we got to make sure they know the truth. Really, do we really need to make sure that? Maybe so, but not in that moment, right? Not in that moment. In that moment, you're being baited. And why? Why would you do exactly what they're hoping that you're going to do? Because it gives them number 16 in their pocket. They go, no one ever listens to me. And you're like, but they didn't ask. Yes, they did. They wanted to be heard, but you didn't hear it as a bid for attention and as a bid to have a conversation. You heard it as stand up at your pulpit and lecture me. And so what I would say is, I don't know, but why does the church hate gay people? And I would shut the hole under my nose and I would listen. And then I would listen to understand, not to rebut, which is what most catechists do. And they're in a hurry, and I've observed them and I've mentored them in the classroom, teachers. And it was like, hey, tell me what was going through your mind when that kid asked that question about abortion. They were like, I don't know, but I was just going nowhere. I was like, oh, I know. I noticed you were going nowhere. Why were you going nowhere so quickly? Why would you not slow down and go nowhere more slowly? And she's like, I never thought of that. Like, slow down and give yourself permission to go, hey, I need to give that some thought. But to recognize those baited questions are huge. And I see that. How do I guide my almost 13, 14-year-old son with what is being taught in our Catholic schools, gay pride, CRT, and these ideas don't belong in Catholic schools. So that question is outside of that conversation of what belongs in Catholic schools is to be addressed by that guy with the white hair who led us in the opening prayer, because he's got That's his purview. And until he brings me in on a committee to have that conversation, it's not mine. But what I will say is to find out here's my questions around that. What's meaningful about that to you? Like, tell me what you're learning. What's that like? Why is that? Why are you drawn to that? And because these are hot topics, and teens don't understand, like, they're experiencing their friends as just their friends. And we're basically telling them that their friends are potentially about to be living a life of sin, and that, like, they just don't get it. And instead of sitting with them to helping them process that, we jump in. So loaded questions, a casual hint. No, what does the church think about that? The reason when my live presentations were ever any good, it's because I listened so much. And it's because of what I do in therapy, and that I'm constantly listening to parents and kids. So we want to listen for the content and emotion, what's not being said. We want to reflect. So if I'm hearing you right, what I'm hearing you say is, like, it's really hard for me to love this person be my best friend who's gay, and yet being raised in a church that tells me that person is intrinsically disordered. And God forbid we use that word with real people. God forbid we use that word. And so I get it. And I'll go, yeah. And like, it's hard for you because and this is how I want you to hear how I would handle that. So, because I think this would help. So it's gotta be hard for you, because my hunch is there's probably something in you that says, the church, I don't know, but man, it's been around a while and a lot of people take it seriously. Man, there's got to be some truth in it. Like, they can't be all wrong. And so they're saying this, and yet I've also got this, and I can't make these two things go together. And this is what the teen does. I know, because I've done it 1,000 times. They go, yeah, that's exactly right. I am now willing to listen to anything that comes out of your mouth because you have named my experience, but I'm not ready to talk yet because I'm still listening. What else about that is a struggle for you? Yeah, well, it just seems like people are born that way. Well, tell me what you know about that. And, like, these are long conversations. Like, we are not effectively addressing these issues in the classroom outside of conversations that are happening interpersonally. The best we can do would be to set up those teaching moments as very hot, volatile topics, and with compassion and understanding, and tell the young people to say, hey, I know this is a volatile topic. I know that there's going to be a lot of disagreement, and we can have conversations about this. And if you're in charge of planning for that, you should plan out some time if you've got to go through that type of curriculum and have those conversations. But if you're not, to say, I get it, and I know, and I want to have as many conversations about it as we can, but there are some things that I do need to present. That tells young people that you're clued in and you're kind of dialed in, and that is helpful. Reflecting. So, hey, do you feel heard? And if not, what am I missing? Show respect. Watch it. We're very judgmental of drama. We go, oh God, they're in drama. And they know, they can pick up on it. If we think they're just being dramatic, and they may be, but if we tell someone they're being dramatic, that goes about as well as the last time someone told you you were being dramatic and you wanted to have a hit put out on them. If I'm correct, because that's how I feel. Because it invalidates us. It tells us that these intense emotions that we're experiencing in the moment aren't real. And when anyone does that, we hate them. We hate them for it. So check and adjust our attitude, avoid being condescending, normalize the behavior. Yeah, lots of kids go through this. It's okay to feel what you're feeling. It's okay for you to feel like you can't agree with this right now. It is okay for you to feel that way. And God, dog, we have a hard time. Those words just, like, it pains people. It makes it nauseous when they come out of a Catholic's mouth, because we're so damn afraid that we're going to give people permission to sin. by validating their experience, which is exactly what Jesus did with the Samaritan woman at the well. Right? He goes, I know you're not married right now, right? But he was with her and he validated her, and God only knows, because that woman went back into town and she said, come see a man who told me everything I've ever done. Who does that when someone just rattles off their hit list and their rap sheet? He didn't just tell her all her sins. He sat and he probably started by telling her, look, you are a beautiful person. You're smart. You're intelligent. And he validated her, right? That was so important. And it's okay. I get why. I get, based on your experience, probably, maybe even of sexual abuse when you were younger. I get, in your experience of, I get why you would have wanted, in seeking the love of a man. I get it. I get how that's how you're hardwired. It makes perfect sense to me, but it's not working for you, right? I've worked with lots of kids who have experienced something similar. Empathy. What's it like for you? What's it like for you? What's that like for you? All right. Offer empathy. Offer a mirror, validate alternatives. Okay, good. Those are the main concepts I wanted to get through. I see we have a couple of questions withdrawn. My 2-year-old son, my son, 20 years, doesn't talk much, very withdrawn. It's in school, will always stays in his room and sleeps a lot. What could be wrong with him? Could be speaker addiction. It could be marijuana. A lot of times marijuana works on norepinephrine. And dopamine, and that it makes it's like a shop vac for a lot of young men's motivation and ambition. It could be that, could be other drugs. Who knows? It could be he's not connecting. Maybe he doesn't have friends. It could be a lot of things going on, and that's tough. He's on another continent. That's got to be really, really tough. Yeah. And so there could be a lot of things going on. I don't know, but I'd certainly want to Zoom with him and and find out. Most Catholic boards are planning to fly. Okay, I knew the accompanying LGBTQ people in Catholic school. How do we justify accompanying teens down the wide, easy path to affirm them, make them feel comfortable when Jesus tells the path? So that's a great question. I hear that.
I'm just going to interject there for a minute, right? Because
shoot.
I think you did a great job answering already.
Okay, good. Okay, great.
That sense of it. I want to let people know that it's an ongoing question, and I just did a talk for the Toronto Catholic School Board, sort of on this overarching topic, and I'll look to maybe doing it here in the fall, because I think it's a complicated question. But I also think that most people saw in the chat that Lucy, who has taught in the schools, gave a beautiful answer about the powerful fact of, in a sense, doing exactly what you've been saying, accompanying. And sometimes I think we're afraid that we are, when we accompany, when we accept, when we let the kids talk, that we're worried that we're actually condoning going against the Catholic faith, which is not true, which is what you're saying. First, let's be in connection with them. And in Ontario right now, there's a big issue, for your knowledge, because various school boards are making a decision about flying for the month of June, the pride flag. And there are two camps. From the school's perspective, they think the flag says, you're welcome here, you're accepted, we know you're here, and we're okay with that. But people outside are worried that we're saying the lifestyle is acceptable, the Catholic faith is wrong. So we can't really get into that topic tonight. I just want people to know.
Yeah, it's here. I know. And I saw the question, and I knew it always comes up. So I get
it's a very sensitive topic, and I just want people to know that I will look to do something in the fall, so we can have a deeper just on that topic.
Good.
On its own.
Great.
There was a question here. Somebody asked that you may want to give some insight in. Actually, there's a twofold. One came way back earlier about the sort of over-parenting as one of the issues, just to touch on that a bit. And then there's another one. I'll give you both, and you can kind of answer both. What is your opinion on homeschooling? Can a young person adjust and grow in a homeschool environment? Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So over-parenting, I am going to offer the book on the left there, The Gift of Failure by Jessica Leahy. her and I also did a podcast, Today's Teenager podcast. To me, this is like the parenting Bible. Overparenting looks like I'm going to talk to the coach because my kid's not getting enough playing time. Overparenting is, my kid forgot his homework, so I'm bringing it to school. Overparenting is I'm just not going to let my kid fail. And and I get it. This is a hard course to track if you haven't been on it the whole time. But it's what happens is when we overparent kids and overdo for them, their sense of autonomy and sense of self-efficacy is not formed. And so when they get to college and you can't protect them from what you need to protect them from, parents do, then that kid is going to have a massive depression because of the lack of self-efficacy, and they're going to get their butts handed to them. So, and Jessica describes that very eloquently. And I'm a huge proponent of it. And I want you to know I practice what I preach. An English teacher sent out, the teachers love it. English teacher sends this email out last year, freshman year, from Mac, my oldest, and like, hey, I just want you to know what's going on. If you have any questions, and I need you to know what this is, when this is coming up, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I get it. And so I emailed her back. I was like, Miss Nicole, Max doesn't have any executive functioning issues. He's got our full support. Number 2, I don't give a damn what y'all are doing in English class. I do, and I trust you. I pay $6,000 a year because Catholic education is not publicly funded in Louisiana. And if I didn't trust you, he wouldn't be there. I know that you sent this out because of parents who are going to completely verbally abuse you because you didn't tell them what the kid is perfectly, but my son is perfectly capable. Take me off your list. The only person I want to hear from in the school is the principal or the disciplinarian. Everyone else has perfect permission to hand my kid his ass because you know what? The real world is absolutely going to do it. And Max Petitfils and Ben Petitfils will be prepared when that day comes. And that's the snowflake. That's where the whole snowflake comment comes from. It's just, I don't know. I can't defend myself. And so it's huge. Her book is amazing. The podcast is more accessible. So then homeschooling, love homeschooling. We tried it. We almost sent our whole family onto antidepressant medication. It was painful. We knew it would be. I think homeschooling kids, a lot of it has to do with the temperament of the kids and the parent. I work with a lot of those families. A lot of good friends of mine are those families. And some of them have the temperament, they have the resources to be able to do it, internal and external, and the kids have, and many of the families I know who have like lots of kids, we don't, one of the kids just, it didn't work out and they had to put the kid in a traditional school. That's where they needed to be. And I'll show the slide of books again. And that's where they needed to be. And like, that's fine. But I'm a huge proponent. And, the old critique for homeschoolers is that, they don't get socialized, but most of the people I know who do it are I think that's, to do it without considering that is naive. But most of the folks I know who do it in a co-op, and there's lots of socialization. There's so many more ways to do homeschooling now than there was pre-COVID, even. Because a lot of us took it up during COVID. So I think it can be great for the right parents and the right kid. So here are the books. Under Pressure by Dr. Lisa D'Amour. I highly recommend all of her. She is the adolescent columnist for the New York Times. I hope to take her job when she decides to let that go. But she's awesome. She was on the podcast a couple of times. For those of us, especially in ministry, especially, in any way riding the dragon, Dr. Robert Wicks should be a mandatory. He's a Catholic psychologist who talks about how to deal with secondary stress. So those are the top of my recommendation list right there. I'm having a hard time getting out. There's this other guy who wrote a few books too, Roy Petitfils. Those are pretty good. I don't know
It's
if
a
the one
great
you're,
book. This is the one I'm presently reading, and it's
which one,
very,
Helping
very good.
Teens?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the best one by far. The editorial team at Ave Maria, we put together it's a handbook. It really is a great handbook. And a lot of what I covered tonight's in that book. I gave you the short version. You know, I'm not a good sales. First of all, we don't make any money off of books. Like, it doesn't do me. And people are like, you should hawk your books more. I'm like, I should go pick up pennies in the parking lot of Walmart too, but I don't. I mean, it's the same thing, but it is a good book. I mean, this one's good too. It's okay too.
It is good. Oh, they're good. There's one last quick little question, I think,
Yeah.
maybe, because although it's directed their 14-year-old with an ADHD loves
Yeah, I did see
risky
that.
behaviors. How do you redirect? Of
How do you-
course, even
yeah.
kids without ADHD sometimes have this, so it might be a good question.
Risk-taking behavior. Yeah, and I think that so there's a difference between being a lawnmower parent and a helicopter parent. Helicopter parenting is better than the lawnmower parent. The lawnmower parent is like on it and they're mowing all the obstacles out of that kid's way. The helicopter parent is like hovering over the kid. But being a low-flying airplane parent is a really good thing because it means you're paying attention and kids feel safe, but they don't feel strangled by the helicopter parent, like with all the dust that the helicopter is kicking up. But they're like, yeah, you're overhead. I can see you. I can even hear you. You're there. That's where I want you to be. Oh, and I know you're watching me out of the window, low flying. And so I can't redirect that which I'm not seeing. And so to redirect it, to anticipate when those types of risky behaviors would be there, and a lot of that though begins with trust and to be talking with them. Like Max understands every time we give him a new permission to do something, I have a 10-second conversation with him, like, look me in the eyes and give me 10 seconds. This is happening because I trust you. When I don't trust you, your life goes from amazing to miserable very quickly. And trust has to be earned back. But that was a bridge we built. My hunch is my youngest one, AKA Purgatory, is going to be busting that trust up all over the damn place. That's just my strong inclination. And I'm going to be eating these words next time I talk to you guys. But, redirecting it, when I hear redirecting behavior, I think of like toddlers. I think of 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds. Okay, no, we're not going to go play with the light socket. Come over here. How do you redirect that when it comes to adolescence? I think it's just a more sophisticated, it's putting mechanisms in place that help redirect the behavior. I told an intern this morning, she goes, I'm afraid to get online and do a podcast because I'm going to say things that I might regret saying. I was like, I've got videos full of things. And the number one I told her is this, that I always thought that kids were too busy and that we overbooked their lives. And I still think that's true for a lot of kids, but I also believe that in today's culture, a lot of kids need to be busy because they don't have the family support, they don't have the supervision and the structure and the internal self-discipline and executive functioning to be able to utilize free, unstructured time in large amounts effectively. And so if you're not going to be home with that kid, redirecting them, kids who are home 4 or 5 hours a day without parents until they come home from work, that is a recipe for misdirection. So that needs a structural redirect as opposed to, well, I told him this weekend not to do that. Well, this kid is strong-willed. I mean, he needs a lot more than this weekend. Any suggestions on safe ways to help them socialize? Seems all kids are homebodies. Yes, safe ways. You've got to decide what you're comfortable with regard to medical and health safety. Within those parameters, drag your kid to socializing, kicking, and screaming. You're going to go. It's not an option. I know you don't want to go. It's not an option. You need to be around people. Even if you come back and don't realize how good it was for you to be around other people, you need to be around other people. And, and if there's some mechanistic things that are tripping that kid up, then yeah, okay, let's talk therapy. Let's talk life coaching. Yeah, there's a lot more of those people out there too, for the record, who do teen life coaching, who can really help. You know, we're trying to bring them into our practice because a lot of folks don't need therapy. They
Right.
certainly don't need my level of therapy. You know, they just need someone to coach them, you know, and you can do that. You know, some certain people can do that. And there's training for that.
Okay, Roy, so I'm going to just wrap it up just
Thank you.
because I know that people, once we get into questions, there's a lot and people will be disappointed if they don't get the questions answered. But we do want to let you know, Nicole McCowell, who's on, but on her phone, so she's typed it to the chat. I just wanted to draw your attention to it in case you didn't see it, that Roy will be joining her. She's director of the youth ministry on May 27th. So if you're working or volunteering with young people, you can go onto the diocesan website under youth ministry and sign up for that. So you'll be able to have more with Roy on that day. And also, while I've got everybody online here, I'm just going to draw your attention to, we have 2 speakers left in May. We're going to have a speaker that's going to do aging with wisdom and grace. So we're going to the opposite side of the spectrum there to try to bring everyone in. And we will, Dr. Elizabeth Barkley is going to give that talk. And in June, we're going to have Bishop Mean, Peterborough Bishop, our former auxiliary bishop, come and do a wrap up on the theme for the World Meeting of Families, Family, A Path to Holiness. So 2 good talks left you can sign up for. And I want to just take this moment now to thank Roy for all the detailed information, for his willingness to allow us to record so you can watch it again and take some of that information away and re-listen to it, because there's a lot. It was packed in. He did tell us it's going to be a fire hydrant. So we're glad that you warned us on that one. But we do appreciate it. I think it's so important that we help our young people, healthy young people, become healthy young adults who bring healthy children into the world, and they have skills and tools to be able to do all that it takes. And none of us are perfect, as you say. So that's one good thing we have to go on, that none of us are perfect. So we don't have to expect it of ourselves. So thank you all for joining us. Nicole, I see you've arrived there. Do you want to add anything, or are you good? You're fine. Nicole's good. Okay. So again, thank you all. I will send out information about our next speaker. Thank you very much, Roy. I really appreciate your time and all the information you've shared tonight. We are better for it. So thank you for that.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. We'll stop our recording here.